The Phillies are mostly done with their offseason after signing Max Kepler and trading for Jesus Luzardo. Are the Braves mostly done with their player acquisition? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Monday, December 23rd, your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. And as always, you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And over the weekend, we saw the Phillies make, probably from what Dave Dombrowski was saying, or at least giving the impression to the media, their last two major acquisitions of the offseason. They signed outfielder Max Kepler to a 1-year, it was $10 million deal, indicated they plan to play him every day. I think it's going to be left field for him. That gives them 5 lefty hitters in that lineup, by the way, if Brandon Marsh is the starter in center, to go along with Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, and Bryson Stott. And then after that, they then turned around and made a trade with the Miami Marlins. They acquired starting pitcher Jesus Luzardo and minor league catcher Paul McIntosh for shortstop Starlin Caba and outfielder Marion Boyd, 2 low minors prospects. I think Boyd finished in high A. Caba barely got any single A time last year at 18 years old. They're a couple years away from the majors. And outside of the conversation of if Atlanta could have made that trade, because I do think the Braves could have found equivalent prospects to make a similar trade to that and get Jesus Luzardo, the implication from Dave Dombrowski when he was talking to the media, and from what I picked up when I was reading some of the media's reports on the trade and talking to the front office, is that Philly, for the most part, was done this offseason, right? The salary, like their payroll is now one of the highest payrolls in baseball. I believe they're expected to be at $304.4 million is their luxury tax payroll estimate, which puts them above the 4th tier. They are now solidly in the Steve Cohen tax. And unless they are able to shed the contract of Nick Castellanos, which I don't think they're going to be able to do, they owe him $20 million this year and next year. I think they're, for the most part, they're done because they've spent all of their money. And it got me thinking about, are the Atlanta Braves done this offseason? A lot of fans have been frustrated that the Braves have been quiet so far in free agency. They haven't gone out really and made any significant signings. I think it's fair to argue the biggest signing the Braves have made of a player not on the roster is bringing in outfielder Brian De La Cruz. That's a non-guaranteed deal. It's either a split deal or a minor league deal. We don't actually know for a fact the mechanics of that. We just know that it's a non-guaranteed deal, and we've all penciled him in as one of the starting corner outfielders to start the season. And then over the weekend, they traded for starting pitcher Davis Daniel from the Los Angeles Angels for prospect pitcher Mitch Ferris, a guy who was DFA'd by the Angels, and the Braves went and picked him up because they saw some stuff that they like. And there's things to like about Davis Daniel. I'll get to him a little bit later in the show. And on Monday, we're going to have one of those patented deep dives from bravestoday.com, the What the Atlanta Braves Saw in Davis Daniel articles that we always do when there's a significant acquisition. But I want to get to if Atlanta is done or not in free agency and what the roster looks like as of now. Because I think there's a couple things that we need to remember about the way that this front office works. And I think the first thing to think about is the pattern that Alex Anthopoulos now has shown us for the last few seasons is they like to go strike early in free agency on whatever the significant move is. And it feels like there's always going to be there's always a signing and there's almost always a trade. But every year there's a big move that the team makes early. So last year, that's something where it was a lot of small stuff to start the offseason. Your usual housekeeping things that you always do early. And then, if you remember, they make the big trade with the White Sox in mid-November to get Aaron Bummer. And then they turned around and they signed Reynaldo Lopez on November 20th. They re-signed Joe Jimenez rather early. They traded Kyle Wright away November 17th. I want to say they signed Jimenez like November 2nd, and that's after they re-signed Pierce Johnson like October 25th. Like Atlanta struck early on those major deals. And then the night before the winter meeting started is when they traded for Jared Kelenic. And then they go out and they trade for Chris Sale. I believe it was December 30th is when it was actually finalized. I think they announced it the 29th, and it was finalized on the 30th. So Atlanta strikes early and does some moves early. And then after that, they don't really do a lot until you get closer to spring training. Last winter, Luis Guillorme signed January 5th, and they made a minor trade, Tyler Owens for JP Martinez, on January 26th. Adam Duvall signed March 14th. So the way that this front office operates, and we can go back in previous seasons if you want and have these same conversations as far as the dates of when Atlanta did everything, right? They made the Jake Odorizzi trade like November 9th. They signed, I want to say they signed like Nick Anderson. In November, they traded for Joe Jimenez like December 7th of 2023. Like, a lot of these the Sean Murphy deal, they re-signed him to the long-term extension like December 27th after getting him December 12th. Like, a lot of the stuff, Atlanta, again, likes to jump early in free agency, make the moves they're going to make, the trades, the signings, or whatever, and then they just sit back. And after that, I don't think they signed another major leaguer the season before until the season started, actually. Orlando Arcia signed an extension in spring training, like March 30th. But they didn't sign another major leaguer all winter. Like, this is how Atlanta works. And so if you extend that out to now, like, the reason that they do it like this, if you look at the salaries versus the expectations, Adam Duvall is a great example of this. Adam Duvall was looking to get some legitimate money coming off of his 2023 season, right? He was with Boston, 92 games. He hit 21 home runs. And 34 OPS was the highest OPS he had since 2019, okay? He was looking for a big contract, but he was also going into his age 35 season. He had played only 90 games, and defensively, he had not looked good in center field. So his market did not materialize like he thought it would. So what did Atlanta do last offseason? They started early. They went out. They got what they thought what ended up being a deal on Reynaldo Lopez. They brought back a couple of their own guys, whether extensions or club options on guys. And then they mostly waited. And they waited for the market to come to where they were. That is how the Braves have wanted to operate in the offseason. We have a couple guys that we are targeting, whether it's trades, whether it's free agency. If we can get the deal done early so they have a full winter with us, we'll do it. And if not, we'll sit back and wait. Usually their big moves are all done by the end of December. This winter, by comparison, has been quiet, right? The Braves have not done a lot, and that's the frustration a lot of us have, is their deals that they have made. They re-signed Reynaldo Lopez to a new deal. Aaron Bummer, they gave him a new deal. But a lot of what they've done was a minor trade for Nick Allen. It was a lot of non-guaranteed deals. Connor Gillespie, Carlos Rodriguez, Brian De La Cruz. They go out, they trade for Davis Daniel. They make some Rule 5 picks, which was completely surprising, and I still don't think that Christian Caro is going to stick on the roster, by the way. Still think Nick Allen beats him out as the primary backup in the infield. But this is what AA does. He identified the guys he wanted to get at the prices he was comfortable in paying. And what is the thing we've all said about this offseason? We've been, for the most part, shocked at what some of these free agents are getting in either money or in years. I will continue to point out that I don't think the stopping point on Max Fried was the money. I don't think Atlanta was that worried about having to pay Max Fried. I think he's making actual cash is something like $22 million in 2025. The luxury tax hit is $27 million. I don't think that, in the end of the day, was the sticking point for the Braves. I think the sticking point was 8 years. Alex Anthopoulos, since he's been in Atlanta, has given a grand total of one pitching contract longer than 3 years, and that's Spencer Strider. And he's already missed pretty much a full season of it while being hurt. Outside of that, the only 3-year deals he's given for pitching, Ronaldo Lopez, Will Smith, and Joe Jimenez. And Jimenez is going to miss just about an entire season as well. That's how Atlanta works, is they don't want to give a long-term commitment to a pitcher. And the one time that they did it, Spencer Strider was, I believe, 24 years old when he signed it. It runs to his age 29 season. And it was an extension, not a free agent signing. It's so many pitchers, I think, have gotten more money and or more years than we were expecting. Feels like every deal is 10 or 15% more expensive. And so because of that's why the Braves haven't done a lot in free agency so far. Now, the big question is, are they going to? And if they do, and if they don't, what does the roster look like for opening day? We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about the offseason for the Atlanta Braves and how a lot of us are frustrated the Braves haven't really done much of anything. And I said I think part of the reason for this is it comes down to the length of time of the deals. So many of these contracts feel like they're going for more years than we were expecting, right? Max Fried for 8 years. So I think either through his age 38 or 39 season. It's a lot longer than I think Atlanta would have ever wanted to go on Max or on a pitcher in general. Even Ronaldo Lopez got a 3-year deal. And when he came after the first season and looked great, they re-upped it on a 3-year deal, and they added, in essence, 1 year to it. I think they may have just guaranteed a club option or something on it. The point is, the Braves don't want to give long-term commitments to a lot of these pitchers. And the Braves don't want to pay the standard free agent price. A lot of the contracts they've given out, look at last offseason as an example. I talked about all the guys early. 2 of them were internal guys that they gave new contracts to that would have been free agents in Jimenez and Pierce Johnson. And then they went out and they got Ronaldo Lopez, and then they got Chris Sale, who had 1 year and I think a vesting option, and they immediately turned around and guaranteed that option to get rid of the deferred money, to get rid of some of the variability of it, the vesting and all of that, and just make it a straight $22 million. There's that limit again. $22 million a year, and you're here for 2 more years with a club option on the end, so the Braves can keep him if they want to. But again, it's a 3-year commitment at max. It feels like that's the direction we're heading again. That Atlanta's going to sit and wait to see how the market comes to where they are as you get closer to spring training. Now, you can debate the effectiveness of a strategy like that, especially when it comes to pitching. I think we saw the 2 ways that could go with Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery last offseason, where Blake Snell was bad early in the year and went on the IL and then rebounded and was awesome. Jordan Montgomery was bad and stayed bad all year, right? I don't know how sustainable that practice is to wait to sign a guy until spring training. But at the same time, if you get him in camp when pitchers and catchers report or soon after, I feel like you're probably fine for the most part, especially if you know what the guy's been doing in the offseason to work, right? Jesse Chavez, they brought him back the very end of spring, and that worked out okay because he was pitching in spring training for the White Sox. Part of the reason his spring training ERA was so bad was they made him wear that very first outing of the year. They put him in for multiple innings and just let him get blasted. But anyway, so I feel like the signings you've seen here, Atlanta's probably tried and been unable to get the guys they wanted at the prices they wanted. We know that they were in on Garrett Crochet. They were one of the finalists that were announced for that. A lot of the word is that Drake Baldwin was the big hang-up in that deal. Personally glad they didn't trade Drake Baldwin. The expectation that I have is that he's getting a lot of at-bats at DH in 2026. And part of me does wonder if resetting the CBT now, if that's the way this offseason goes, which I still think if you want to spend money, and if they still have room to spend money, the estimates for the payroll right now are $201 million. The luxury tax estimate right now is $217. And again, $241 is the first threshold, so $24 million. And if you keep $4 million or so for in-season moves, you've got $18 to $20 million that you can spend. Part of me wonders is if you reset the CBT this year, are you planning on spending more the next offseason? Because as you go into the 2026 offseason, you have more money coming off the books in Marcell Ozuna and Raisel Iglesias. Both of them are making $16 million this season. It is the final year of their deals. In Ozuna's case, this is his club option we picked up. In Iglesias' case, this is the end of the deal that he had with the Angels. They are both unrestricted free agents next year. Trim another $32 million off of the CBT. You do have some salary escalation. Strider goes from 4 to 20. He takes up some of that 16 right there. Ronaldo Lopez goes from 8 to 14. You do have some salaries that get a little bigger. Aaron Bummer goes from 3.5 to 9.5. You eat some of that up, but you free up some money for 2026. You have to pick up the Chris Sale option. Pierce Johnson has an option. That's the first of the two Ozzie Albies $7 million options and the Orlando Arcia option. To me, this is the beginning of when you have to start making decisions about Ozzie Albies and Ronald Acuna Jr. Ozzie Albies has club options for 26 and 27. Acuna has club options for 27 and 28. Is part of the reason they're considering resetting the CBT this year, one, to get away from that 50% tax, but two, so that they can set up the finances to potentially give an extension to Ronald Acuna Jr. and or Ozzie Albies. Is that a thing? I don't know. We have literally no word on that whatsoever. But that could be a potential thing that they're doing. The other thing that I think about is the free agent classes still don't really help you with your major needs. Because the potential free agents after 25, you should be good at catcher, but if for some reason you are not, if Sean Murphy does not turn it around like I expect him to, and show you why you gave him the money, there are a couple veteran catchers coming free. JT Realmuto, Salvador Perez, I think it's a club option there with Perez. Mitch Garver, mutual options are never picked up. Danny Jansen, mutual option, those are never picked up. Obviously, the big star next offseason is going to be Vlad Guerrero, and then your pitcher, your Dylan Cease, your Zach Gallen, your Framber Valdez. Michael King will be a free agent. Shota Imanaga can opt out. I think Kodai Senga can opt out. Ranger Suarez will be a free agent. There's a ton of pitching coming open next offseason. And then in the outfield, Kyle Tucker will be a free agent. Kyle Schwarber. Not that I think the Braves would go after Kyle Schwarber, but there's a lot of, the only position you really don't have a lot of depth, as always, is shortstop, right? You got Bo Bichette, who we have questions about where Bo Bichette will be offensively at that point. And then Trevor Story could opt out. He'd be dumb to do that. You'd be dumb to sign him. Orlando Arcia's club option again for 26, which as of now looks like they'll pick it up because there's not a lot of other shortstops in the organization you trust on an everyday basis. I think that you get like Jorge Mateo of the Orioles as a free agent, veteran Miguel Rojas, not a starter every day. And then the greatest two-way player in baseball history, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, is a free agent as well, but he's not a starter on an everyday basis. Those free agent classes don't really help you a ton because the positions that they're deep in are either things that you don't necessarily need, first base, places, because that's Yandy Diaz, Rhys Hoskins is in that class. It's a decent group of first basemen. Third base, Eugenio Suarez, Max Muncy, another position you don't really need help in. Or it's full of guys that could potentially be out of your price range, right? Your Dylan Cease, your Zach Gallen, your Framber Valdez. Those are going to be three massive contracts. Michael King's going to get a good deal, I think, if he comes back from Tommy John and looks okay. I misspoke. That's Joe Musgrove that had Tommy John. Michael King just tore Atlanta up in the postseason. That's what it was. Shota Imanaga. Shane Bieber has a player option. If he comes back from Tommy John, he could opt out and take all that. Is it possible Atlanta's saving money for that class? Maybe. You will need a closer. Edwin Diaz could opt out. Devin Williams will be on the market. Ryan Helsley will be on the market. Robert Suarez could opt out and be on the market. Like, looking at some of these names, like there's some good pitchers coming free, both in starting and relieving. As of now, guys can always sign extensions. But I really don't necessarily think the Braves are looking ahead to 26. I think the Braves are being honest and saying, hey, that 50% tax is a burden on us. If we want to extend anybody, if we want to sign somebody from outside, we don't bring in outside guys a lot. But if we do, the cost is significantly higher. Think about, okay, Ronaldo Lopez will cost you $8 million this year and $14 million in 26. If you don't reset the luxury tax for 2025, that $14 million for Lopez, in essence, becomes $21 million because of the 50% tax. The $22 million for Riley becomes $33. The $22 million for Olsen becomes $33. The $20 for Strider becomes $30. I understand why they would want to reset the CBT if they can. And I think AA was telling us the truth when he said that he is open to going over the CBT if the right deal comes along. But just because he's willing to do it doesn't mean I think he's eager to do it. And is that frustrating as a fan of the Braves? Yes, 100%. That at times can be frustrating because you look at the outfield right now and you're like, okay, our starting outfield is Michael Harris, Jared Kelenic, and Brian De La Cruz. And it feels like this team should have a more competitive outfield than that. Your starting shortstop is Orlando Arcia, who went from an all-star in 2023 to literally one of the worst hitters in baseball in 2014. He hit 2024. He hit 218. I'm looking at so many numbers here. He hit 218 with a 354 slug. What's funny? That slug was still higher than Sean Murphy's slug, which was 352. But I have a lot more faith that Murphy will turn it around than I do Arcia, because Murphy was hurt. Arcia was just bad. Here's the thing. This roster, with everybody healthy, with your 1 through 6 being Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Marcell Ozuna, Ronald Acuna Jr. in some order, is good enough to get you to the World Series. It is. It is good enough. Your rotation with Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez and Spencer Schwellenbach, and at some point in time, Spencer Strider and Grant Holmes and probably Ian Anderson, is good enough to get you to the World Series. And because we see so many other teams in our division getting better, whether it's smaller deals like Max Kepler and Jesus Luzardo, or it's bigger things like Juan freaking Soto, it feels like the Braves are falling behind, when in reality, they were always out ahead of everybody else. And the only reason that Philly was even able to win the division and the Mets were even able to get ahead of the Braves was generationally bad injuries on Atlanta's part. And Atlanta still made the postseason. And I challenge you to find a lot of other teams in baseball where you could take 3 of their best players off of their roster from opening day and have them still make the postseason. And we just have to remember that this is a very good core. And if a deal comes free, if a deal is there that fits in with the money we're trying to spend, the play time that we have, I'm confident Alex Anthopoulos will do it. Because for the most part, he hasn't gotten very many of these trades wrong. I understand the Sean Murphy deal is not a very popular deal right now. But he won the Matt Olson deal, right? A lot of he won the Chris Sale deal. Think about the 2021 trade deadline. The Braves were a week away from packing it up and going home. He gets Jock Peterson, and it worked out. And then he got Jorge Soler and Eddie Rosario and Adam Duvall. And what do? They win the World Series. AA has earned the benefit of the doubt here. It's not fun to just trust him on this, right? It's not a popular, and there's going to be people in the comments on this video, on this podcast, that are mad, that say, no, we should not just trust him on this. But it's worked before. And even if you don't make any other adds to this roster, as of right now, you're still the betting favorite to win the National League East. And you're still favored as one of the best teams in the National League and a likely World Series participant just off the roster you have now. So while it feels like it's getting to a point of desperation of you have to get somebody, you don't. Do I want you to? Yes. By all means, please get somebody. Please make some more signings and trades and all of that, right? But you don't have to, because as this team is right now, this is still a division-winning team. This is still a World Series capable roster. They just have to go out and do it. This has been Braves Today for Monday, December 23rd. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell when we drop the next episode. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.